very much within your capacity if you are an accounting professional listening to this to make it, but it does require a very dedicated and a deliberate shift to make it work.
Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have a great guest on. And when you think about those companies that win these amazing awards, and you always think like, is that company real, or maybe they're just out of reach? And this is a company that has won some amazing awards, and I wanted to bring on the co-founder and the leader of this company to talk about kind of that experience. So you start to hear, hey, the awards are great, but hey, here's the work that we've been doing and the value we've been adding for our clients. So, Brad, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Terrell. It's been a pleasure to get to know you behind the scenes, and I'm sure we'll have a good chat today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, your company is called, the Outperformer, and I think that definitely describes, I think it describes you guys well. But to give us a little bit more context, can you tell us a little bit about your background, and then I want to talk about the Outperformer.
Yeah, no, of course, very very happy to. It's the Outperformer was an interesting name when we came up with when we were setting up what we want to stand for as a business, and it probably reflects a lot about my mindset towards how I've looked at my own career and my own journey relative to my clients that I've had throughout the work I've done. And if I take everyone back a little bit before I describe the Outperformer, I'm someone who, for a lot of your audience, a lot of them are accountants or small business owners. I started life like a lot of people, not knowing what I wanted to do. I actually, in Australia, was training really hard and playing a very high level of rugby league in our area, and had this sort of experience of working in high performance environments in the sporting field. But then I got an injury. It's debatable whether I would have been, a Tom Brady equivalent or just another guy on the field. But the reality was it was never going to happen, unfortunately, because of a few things. So I made some decisions, and I was very passionate about business. I studied hard, did all the things that you do when you're early in your career, and got into the work environment. But during my experience, I always sat there and challenged myself when I was working, saying, why do we do things in such this sort of processy, kind of unintelligent way sometimes? Businesses seem to start with this mindset of getting staff to think about doing a task, doing a process, getting things done, which is really, really important in the scheme of getting businesses operational and delivering value to to their clients. But I could see that it was stopping everywhere I worked. It was always this notion of thinking about what to do rather than what the impact we needed to be was. And I have always had that perspective of looking at the end game. What is it that I want to achieve? So if I take it back to the sporting environment, in Australia, I'm a very small person. I'm about 5'7", 5'8", not particularly big. I'm playing rugby league against guys 110, 15 kilos, 6 foot odd tall. And I always knew that was going to be the case. I always knew I was the smallest guy, but I still wanted this particular outcome. I still wanted to get to the highest level I could, and I still had a particular capabilities that would probably allow me to get there. So I always challenged myself around, if you're going to, perform and be at your best, you can't start from a place of process. You have to start from a place of outcome, and then engineer and design the way you need to operate to get to that outcome, and have fun along the way doing it, right? There's no point doing it if it's no fun. So, it led us, over the years, I got involved in a few different fields of consulting, and particularly for a period of time in executive search, where I got to really understand the finance field. I worked with CFOs for a good 10, 12 years. I wrote a book about the pathway to CFO, and really got analytical about what it took to get to that end state. And it was quite popular over in Australia and different parts of the world. But the thing that came out of this whole experience for me was if I take the mindset I have around business and performance, if I take some of the learnings I had in that field, I basically started to engineer, ways to solve problems that weren't being solved particularly well for the CFO function. And now, much more recently, in the area of accounting practices, doing a lot of work with accounting practices around the area of business advisory, what value looks like to the typical business owner, how to engineer that in the way you deliver services. And of course, really demystifying what business advisory looks like in a way that genuinely allows your clients to develop their business and for you to be a key part of it, not just I guess for want of a better word, not doing the pure accounting task, but actually consulting to make an impact. So lots of fun stuff along the way. I could tell you a million stories about different things we've done, but all those awards have come on the back of just innovating and being able to make a difference. So, if we start something, our real question is, how do we make that difference? And that's been the essence of the work we do.
Gotcha. There's something you pointed out about, being in sports where, you have that clarity about what the goal is. Do you feel like when you left sports to go into kind of the working force, that the goals were as clear, or were they a bit, fuzzy?
Well, look, to be honest, I think it depended on the environment. It depended on the culture of the organization. But I think, in essence, when you start dealing with an executive group, people do know what the goal is intuitively, and they're aware of what they're trying to achieve. But then they get caught up in a lot of other activities or things that they're conscious of that stop that real drive for goal. Right. So if you think about any sporting team, usually in a competition basis, the end goal is we win the competition, we get the trophy, happy days, we all celebrate, right? It's pretty obvious, and it's quite a clear goal that doesn't disappear. Whereas in an organization, whether it's small or large, it doesn't really matter. I see it consistently is, things like ego get in the way, things like our preference for the way we'd like to work, the fact that we need to work with others to deliver on projects, the stress of delivering a particular task or a component of our work with others. The challenges when you start to going down to small businesses, around, my goal might be, profit and sales, if you think about the simplicity of a strategy. But yet I'm dealing with, a manufacturing plant that's just chaotic and I can't get it to work, or my marketing's not working, I'm not getting enough leads, and the stress of actually doing this stuff I'm really passionate about just dies, right? So it's a very emotional journey, and that allows, when it's not an obvious finish line, and there isn't an obvious finish line in business, that idea of the goal or the objective can be very difficult to keep your eye on. And then to engineer what you focus on and how you elevate either as an executive or as a business owner, is a challenge. It's a really different game. So while there's lots of stuff that you can take from sport, and I certainly do draw on sport for some inspiration, but for other inspiration, I draw on the nature of a human being. What is it that goes on for us psychologically? How do we think? How do we behave? What are the triggers that we have to fear, that around fear and anxiety and concern that stop us being at our best, right? And how do we manage that? So there's this whole relationship between strategy and the human being that allows performance to come together. So it's very abstract, some of the stuff I'm sharing with you now, but when it comes together practically for a business, and you do orientate towards a really strong, clear, important future state, navigating through a lot of that emotion can be something that people can lean into.
No, I think that's a very good point, because as you were talking, it made me think about, for myself, of doing CFO consulting for our clients. A lot of times, if I'm working with someone new, they always ask the question of like, "Hey, what should my next step be?" And you got to give that typical finance accounting answer. Well, it depends. and because I think it's one of those things where I think some people probably, I wonder if and maybe I wonder if you've seen this, like, do you think people struggle with that ambiguity that, hey, there isn't, like, in business, there isn't like just one clear goal? And do you think people struggle with that some?
Yeah, well, they do. They absolutely struggle with that, and they don't even struggle with the one clear goal piece. They struggle wanting to have the answer to their problem now, right? So often the reason someone will say to you, Terrell, well, what do you think I should do? Is that's their safety response. Give me an answer that gives me certainty, right? Once I have that certainty, then I'll feel better. And of course, they know that that's not the truth, because when you get the answer, implementing that and changing and evolving your business or changing who you need to be to lead that is the hard part. Right. So, the reality is that if we relied on information or insight to be successful, it'd be the same as the way people look at training and going to the gym. There's so much information out there. We'd all have six packs and be the fittest person on earth. It's easy to get information, and it's easy for people to feel like getting the information or getting that insight gives them a license to be successful, but it doesn't, right? So, like you say, that acceptance that we're in a journey of change, we're in this sort of ever evolving pathway towards something that's important to us. The goal can be there, and the objective should be there to keep us anchored to what makes this whole thing work and sustain. But the real piece is knowing that it is emergent. It's complex. No one saw COVID-19 coming, right? And some of the plans and some of the goals and objectives that people had in that sort of 6 to 12 month period of time from the start of 2020 were thrown out the window.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't mean the ultimate strategy and what we stand for as a person and what our business is meant to do needed to be completely changed. Sometimes it did. Sometimes the environment forced us to really reinvent who we are, and in other cases, it allowed us to be better as a result, right? So what it shows, just even in the example of the last 12 to 18 months, is this notion of knowing that we're in this ever emergent, changing world that our business or our organization lives in, and we have to continue to change with it. So, like you say, in the CFO advisory or any other form of advisory, one component is, what could I do, or what could I explore, or what's important to solve here. Yeah. The next piece is knowing that that's a point in time relative to a bigger picture, and that's the complexity. But yeah, you're right. We seek answers for all the time, and it does help us feel a little bit more certain. But is it really what we need? It's questionable. Sometimes we do need just an answer that gets us out of jail. Hey, you know what? I've got a tax problem, Terrell. You know the rules. You know how it works. Can we just solve this today? That's a simple problem. But things that are much more strategic obviously require a very different mindset and approach.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. I mean, now speaking of, with helping, business owners, helping businesses, and just kind of navigating that journey in general, I'd love to hear a little bit more, like, what is the experience like for people working with, the Outperformer, and what are the products or services you guys offer?
Yeah, look, good question. It's been fun, and we continue to build things all the time that our clients look at. But so I guess, just to simplify it, we work in two very clear pathways or client types. So one is the corporate or the large business, and the teams within that. So when we started, we very much worked with the CFO and the CFO function. We would look at the development of the finance strategy and how that plays out in terms of decisions around culture and behavior. And there's this big buzzword, particularly where I'm from in Australia, of business partnership or finance business partnership, which is often the starting point. Most companies would come to us and say, we want our team to be better business partners. And of course, it's not just a case of learning, influencing skills or anything like that. It's really about embedding that in their culture. So we work on that corporate side. The big piece that's been really interesting and a huge part that we do there is around digitization. So we have a team that explore and diagnose opportunities to roll out automation and basically create efficiency or impactful technology solutions to support the way they work. The other side of our business is a really cool piece, and that's around business advisory and installing business advisory services within accounting practices. So it builds off a lot of the frameworks and concepts that we work on in the corporate sense, but it takes it down to how you can leverage and work that into traditionally small to medium-sized businesses that most accounting practices work with. And so while we don't necessarily always work with their client, the small to medium-sized business owner, we have team members and people that do a lot of that themselves, but we really work on how do you install that capacity, right? How do you get your team who may be currently tax accountants or business services accountants to either migrate or look at changing the way your firm looks and operates, hiring the right talent, developing your own capability as a partner, those sorts of things, right? So it's a really interesting experience. So we actually are partners with Chartered Accountants ANZ over in the Australia New Zealand region, and we've developed all of the learning experience for that and do a longer term implementation of that with many organizations. So that's been fun. Cool to see the how the accounting practice is evolving. It's, there's so much potential. The biggest thing, we talked about this, Terrell, before. One of the biggest things I see is how CFO advisors or accounting professionals just are sitting on a mountain of gold when it comes to potential, in terms of the access to clients, the trust they typically have with clients, or at least the exposure to build enough trust to do this sort of more strategic work. It's amazing that when you unlock it and how much it's enjoyable for the partner or the practice operators, and obviously for their clients, they love it. So so that's basically what we get into.
Okay, nice. Now, how can people get in touch with you guys, whether it's online or social media?
Yeah, look, we've got a LinkedIn page. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn if you're ever curious to get to know me or do any work with our business. So that's Brad Eisenhuth on LinkedIn. But look, if there are practice owners, all over the world that want to look at what's happening in Australia, it's quite, I think, cutting edge in terms of what the rest of the world's doing. So you could always go onto the Chartered Accountants ANZ website and take a look at the Business Advisory Accelerator. And while our name sort of features on it, it's very much a product we've developed for them, and we work in partnership with them. So you can always take a look at that, or go to our website, www.theoutperformer.co. There's plenty there you can take a look at if you're curious.
Awesome. And I think that that's definitely something I've heard about the great things going on in Australia when it comes down to accounting and finance practices, because what's been so funny is that accountants, they're around business a lot, but I would say from what I've been exposed to, there's been a lot of accounting, I guess you say, leaders in an accounting practice that didn't learn the business side, like how to actually run a business, until like after they got thrown in it. So I think you guys are doing some great things in Australia. So yeah, definitely people go check out the website. And can you mention the website one more time?
Yeah, it's www.theoutperformer.co. And take a look. And look, building on what you just said, look, it's reasonable. One of the conversations I had with the chartered accountants when we started working with them a few years back, I said, well, they were saying this is where people seem to want to go, but they're not getting it, and it's not working for them. And there's all these checklists out there and other companies that are doing things that are trying to help them. And I was like, well, that, you've got to look at the root cause of this, right? It's not that practice leaders are not intelligent. It's not that people that we get to work with every day are not capable of doing business advisory. But for years and years and years, the way that we've been developed has not set people up for exactly what you just said there: running, leading, developing a business. we've been set up to do accounting, and that's okay. That's part of what is important in the career path and the profession. But the key realization is that that's, if you want to develop that capability, there's a very different pathway to developing it than what we've developed in the past. So it's not to suggest that accountants aren't capable of it, or that there's something lacking in this area. I think there's a lot of capability, but it does require a mindset shift, and it is based on the way we've been trained and the way we've developed people to task, to getting things done on time, to navigating very analytical, complex issues that still relate to where we're going, but we take it up to a more strategic level. So yeah, it's a really good point you raised there. I just wanted to mention that it's very much within your capacity, if you are an accounting professional listening to this, to make it, but it does require a very dedicated and a deliberate shift to make it work.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up, one question I like to ask every guest that comes on. I mean, when you think about, your experiences, can you share with us, what's 2 tips that you would share with a person who's leading a accounting or finance practice? What's 2 tips you would share with them?
Well, it all comes back to what you want to achieve, right? So the first thing is, got to know where you want to go. And it sounds like a really obvious one, Terrell. But you'd be surprised the number of accounting practice leaders that I speak to that sort of say, well, that's a good question. Because, you've got a certain number of clients, and usually the strategy is, well, bring in more clients and put on more accountants. But, there's this whole world of, the client journey and what they need to achieve and what that might create in terms of innovative service lines. So, start with the first thing around setting that objective is start with your client, start with your strategy based around how you deliver value to your client and how that translates into performance for your business. And if that requires a lot of change and you're unwilling to change, that's fine as well. But know your risk, know your appetite for that particular objective, right? And usually the more ambitious, the more reward that comes with it, but also the more challenge and complexity. So that's the first tip I'd say. Second thing is, and this is probably more aimed at those that want to develop business advisory, because it is the buzzword of the time. Every accounting practice owner is considering it that I seem to be speaking to. So I think really understand what it is, understand what the difference is between business advisory and other services, right? Try not to get caught up into, this advisory being management reporting, or advisory being sitting down with your client and going through their numbers every month. Understand what it is, understand the emergent nature of what a business needs to work through, and how you are that counsel or that advice and that sponsor to growth. And once you understand what it is, probably the key piece then is to learn how to deliver it and how to sell it, right? That component of the journey is very, very different. You're selling a value-oriented service. You're selling something where you're not delivering value through time per se. There is time associated with you. Always have an asset of time involved, but you're delivering value through the objectives and the navigation of and analyzing where a business is right now, what the next best move is, and how to continually work with them to that bigger goal. So when you think about that, it's a very different process to onboarding a client and selling to them, and of course in terms of how you deliver it. So that's probably my second tip if you are thinking about business advisory, is to set yourself up for success by understanding it.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is the wisdom by Brad Eisenhuth. So Brad, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure having you. And before we go, can you mention your website one more time so people can go check you out?
Thanks, Terrell, mate. It's been awesome speaking to you too. It's always fun, mate. The website is www.theoutperformer. So that's THEOUT performer.co.
Awesome. Well, definitely thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure having you.
Good on you, Terrell. All the best, and well done on all the work you're doing with this podcast. It's impressive. Well done, mate.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.